presented by Mr. Darsnights. The story you're about to hear may just follow you into your sleep. There's something unnerving about silence, not the peaceful kind, but the heavy, uncomfortable quiet that feels like it's listening. Ethan Parker had just moved into building 12B of Rosehill Apartments. It was supposed to be temporary, just a month or two until he found a better place downtown. The rent was cheap, the landlord hardly asked questions, and most of the units were vacant. Perfect, he'd thought. A quiet place to think, to reset his life. But the quiet here wasn't peace. It was too still, like the building was holding its breath. His first night, Ethan heard something strange. Around 2:47 a.m., a low scraping sound woke him up, like furniture being dragged slowly across a wooden floor. But it wasn't coming from his apartment. It was from the unit directly beside his, room 3B. He sat up in bed, confused. Hadn't the landlord said the entire third floor was empty? The next morning, Ethan asked the maintenance guy, an old man with shaky hands named Mr. Callahan. The man didn't even look up when Ethan mentioned 3B. Nobody's lived there in years, he muttered, his eyes fixated on the ground. Don't go near that one. But I heard something, Ethan insisted. Last night, it sounded like... Callahan shook his head slowly. You heard the wind. These old buildings creak. That's all. But that night it happened again. Scraping. Then a dull thud. And this time, Ethan swore he heard something more. A whisper. Just one word. Help. Ethan's skin prickled. He pressed his ear to the wall. Silence. Then, faintly, a shuffling step. Like someone barefoot, dragging their heel as they moved. He didn't sleep that night. Days passed. The sound continued. Faint, irregular. The dragging. The thumping. Sometimes at midnight. Sometimes at 4 a.m. Always from 3B. Always when the building felt the most dead. Ethan started taking notes, timing the noises, recording them. But every playback was blank, just static and the occasional crackle. Then the blood appeared. A dark stain near the base of the door to 3B. He noticed it one morning as he left for coffee. He crouched down, touched it with his finger. Still wet. His stomach flipped. He knocked on the door. No answer. Next night, he stayed awake with a flashlight. At 3:03 a.m., the noises began again. This time, there was a low groan, like someone in pain. He grabbed his coat and stepped into the hallway. Every light flickered as he passed. The closer he got to 3B, the colder the air became. Then he saw him, a figure, barely visible in the dim hallway light, standing near the stairwell. An old man in a dusty gray robe, watching Ethan, not moving, just staring. You shouldn't be out here, the man said, voice dry like leaves. There's someone in 3B, Ethan replied. I heard them. They might be hurt. The man's head tilted. Room 3B has been empty since 1991. Ethan's breath caught. But no one ever stays in that room, the old man whispered, taking a step forward. And those who ask about it don't stay long either. Ethan blinked, and the man was gone. Just gone. Back in his room, Ethan checked the wall again, cold to the touch. That night, the dragging sound grew louder, faster, like something was being pulled violently. He put his hands over his ears and waited for morning. But morning didn't bring relief. Instead, the note arrived, slipped under his door. A piece of paper, yellowed with age, written in old ink, leave before it remembers you. And that's when he saw it. In the mirror, just behind him, a shadow, standing right behind him, unmoving, watching. When he turned, nothing was there, but the mirror was cracked. And the crack? It ran in a perfect line from the top of the glass to the place where the shadow's head had been. The next few days passed like a fever dream. Ethan stopped going to work. He barely ate. His days and nights blurred together in a haze of paranoia and obsession. His phone battery stayed dead. His curtains were always drawn. The world outside didn't feel real anymore. Only the building mattered now. Only the noise from 3B. Only the unanswered questions. Every night, without fail, the dragon returned, sometimes followed by soft knocks, sometimes whispers, always subtle, just quiet enough to make him question his sanity. On the fifth night, Ethan gathered the courage to return to the hallway. He stood outside room 3B with a flashlight and a crowbar, his breath visible in the unexplainable chill that hung in the corridor. The door looked wrong under the dim emergency light, warped like it was breathing. He pressed his ear against it and heard nothing. Then knock, knock, knock from inside. He stumbled back, heart hammering, dropping the flashlight. It rolled down the hallway and stopped at the feet of someone standing in the shadows. Callahan, the old maintenance man. "You need to leave," Callahan said, his voice trembling. "You weren't supposed to hear it. It likes to be left alone." "What the hell is in there?" Ethan snapped. "Why do you all pretend this floor is empty? What happened in that room?" Callahan glanced at the door, like it might open at any second. Then he leaned in closer, whispering fast. "There was a tenant. Years ago. A young man, maybe your age. Moved in, quiet guy. Kept to himself. One day he vanished. Never checked out. Just gone. Police searched, but the room was locked from the inside and they found nothing. No signs of struggle. Just blood. Walls covered in handprints. His own. From the inside." Callahan's voice dropped to a hoarse whisper. "They sealed the room. Said it was cursed. Said whatever got him was still in there. I've worked here 32 years, son, and every few decades, it wakes up again. Picks a new one to remember." Ethan's mouth went dry. "You mean it chooses people?" Callahan nodded once. "And if it's chosen you, boy, there ain't no running." Then he walked away, disappearing into the elevator, leaving Ethan alone with the door. That night, Ethan dreamed. He was in room 3B, but it wasn't empty. It was full of mirrors. Every surface showed his reflection, except one. One mirror showed him lie on the floor, mouth open, eyes wide in terror, and something, dragging him across the room by the ankles. He woke up screaming. The next morning, the bloodstain outside 3B had spread. He tried cleaning it. Bleach, scrubbing. Nothing worked. The stain seemed to seep back no matter what he did. Later that evening, he got a call. A number he didn't recognize. When he answered, it was pure static at first. Then a whisper. "Why are you still here?" The line went dead. That was the last straw. He grabbed his crowbar and flashlight and headed for the door of 3B. He'd had enough. He had to know. He hesitated for only a second before ramming the crowbar under the knob and prying it loose. The lock cracked with a horrible sound. The door creaked open. Darkness. Thick, unnatural darkness that seemed to suck in the flashlight's beam. The air inside was ice cold. The scent was awful, coppery, like dry blood and rotting flowers. He stepped in. The apartment was untouched. Dusty furniture covered in sheets. Old wallpaper peeling. But something was off. The walls were covered in handprints. Dozens of them. Smears of blood where fingers had clawed at the surface. Scratches gouged into the wood. Desperate, terrified, his flashlight flickered. From the corner of the room, he heard a click, then a dragging sound. Slow, deliberate. He turned around, nothing. But the sound grew louder. Then came the whisper. "Ethan!" His breath caught. He hadn't told anyone his name. The whisper came again, this time from right behind him. "Why are you still here?" He turned and saw the shadow, a perfect silhouette, standing motionless in the hallway. He backed away, heart pounding, stumbling into what must have been the bedroom. Inside was the bed. And beneath the bed, something was breathing, low and steady. Then he saw it. etched into the wall above the headboard. A sentence, carved in with fingernails. I never left. And suddenly, the flashlight died. Total darkness. Then the door slammed shut. Ethan screamed, hammering on the door, clawing at it, but the room wasn't listening. Then silence, not peace. That heavy, oppressive silence that feels like someone is holding their breath behind you. Ethan felt a presence near his neck. Close, too close. He spun around. Nothing, but in the window reflection, he saw it, himself, covered in blood, bruised, eyes black, and standing over him, a second self, an exact copy, smiling. Then everything went black. When Ethan woke up, he was lying in his bed, in his apartment. Bright daylight streamed through the blinds. It had all been a dream. Or had it? His phone buzzed. A message from a number with no contact. You came back, just like before. He checked the door to 3B, perfectly locked. No sign he had ever broken in. No bloodstains. No handprints. Even Callahan was gone, replaced by a younger maintenance worker who claimed he'd worked there for 2 years and had no idea who Callahan was. The building didn't remember, but Ethan did. And every night now, at exactly 3:03 a.m., he stands at his window and watches room 3B, because sometimes when a hallway light flickers, he sees himself standing there, staring back, smiling. Ethan no longer recognized himself. Mirrors lied to him now. Every reflection was just a moment too slow, a breath too still, a stare too vacant. The apartment felt wrong too, like it had been rearranged when he wasn't looking. The light switch he always flipped at the front door was gone. The closet now opened into a brick wall. He tried to tell himself he was tired, that he was losing sleep, hallucinating. But the truth was clawing at the back of his brain, like a scream trapped behind his teeth. Something had changed since he opened that door. The hallway outside 3B was different now. Slightly longer, colder, like the floor was stretching. Some nights, the elevator never arrived, no matter how many times he pressed the button. Other nights, it opened to show a hallway that didn't belong to this building at all. And the noises from room 3B? They stopped being noises. Now it whispered in voices. Not just any voices, his own. Sometimes the voice begged. Sometimes it cried. Sometimes it laughed. But always it was him. He tried leaving. Packed a bag. Booked a motel 3 towns over. Drove until the city lights disappeared in his rear-view mirror. And still, when he opened the motel room door to step out and get ice, it was the hallway. The same wallpaper, the same hum in the air, the same number on the door across from him, 3B. That night he didn't sleep. He stared at the door for hours until it opened. Nothing stepped out. No figure, no sound, just darkness, deep, endless, inviting. He slammed his motel door shut and screamed. But when he looked again, it was gone. The hallway was normal again, back in his own apartment. If it was even his anymore. He found something waiting on the kitchen table. A photograph. Yellowed. Torn at the edges. It showed the hallway of Rose Hill Apartments. Taken decades ago. And in the photo, 3 figures. One was Callahan. Younger, but unmistakable. Another was a landlord Ethan had only seen once when he moved in. And the third was himself. Standing at the far end of the hallway. Half-shadowed. Staring straight at the camera. He flipped the photo over. There was handwriting in red ink, taken after the incident. All 3 presumed dead. Ethan dropped it like it had burned him. He began tearing through records, digging into public databases, old newspaper archives. He didn't exist. No apartment lease, no phone bill, no job records. His name brought up a single article, an old obituary from 1991. Ethan James Parker, age 26, found dead in his apartment under mysterious circumstances. No signs of forced entry. Believed to be self-inflicted injuries, though no weapon was ever found. Case remains unsolved. His picture was right there, staring back at him. Same eyes, same face, same building, same room, Room 3B. Ethan's mouth went dry. He staggered back, gasping, barely breathing. His heart was thudding like a war drum, every beat screaming that he shouldn't be alive, that he never left that room, that all of this, his escape, his life, was just borrowed time. He wasn't investigating a murder. He was the murder. He had been trying to solve his own death. That night, he returned to room 3B one last time. The door opened before he touched it. Inside, it was no longer an apartment. It was a mirror, endless mirrors lining the walls, floor, and ceiling, each one showing him hundreds of versions of Ethan, some crying, some screaming, some reaching out, all trapped behind glass. One mirror stepped forward, and it spoke. "You left us behind." Ethan stumbled back. No, You escaped when the door opened, but we never did. "I'm not supposed to be here," Ethan whispered. "You were never supposed to leave." The reflection grinned. Blood spilled from his mouth as it pressed its hand against the glass. "But now that you're back, we can all come home." The mirrors shattered. Thousands of shards scattered around him. Each one reflected a different version of the same moment. Ethan dying, on the floor, in the bathtub, hanging, bleeding, screaming. He saw himself die in every imaginable way. And then he felt it. His hands lifted without his control. His feet moved. He turned to face the center of the room, where a chair now sat. Old, wooden, familiar, bloodstained. He sat, not by choice, and the room began to shrink. The mirrors drew closer. His vision blurred, and he remembered. He remembered the night he died. Alone, forgotten, screaming inside a room no one came to open. He remembered scratching at the walls. He remembered writing, "I never left," with the last of his blood. And he remembered choosing to stay. Ethan opened his mouth to scream, but no sound came, only silence, the kind that listens. Then, a knock at the door. The room fell still. The mirrors vanished. Ethan was gone. In his place, just an empty chair, facing the door, waiting. The hallway outside room 3B was normal again. Quiet, empty. A new tenant moved into the building a week later. She was young, alone, excited to start a new chapter of her life. The landlord gave her the keys. "Avoid room 3B, he warned casually. That one sealed off. She laughed. "Urban legends, huh?" That night, she heard it, dragging. Then a whisper, "Help." But when she pressed her ear to the wall, she didn't hear someone asking for help. She heard someone whispering a name, Ethan. And in her bathroom mirror, she saw him, standing behind her, smiling. It was raining when she moved in. Soft drizzle that blurred the city skyline outside her dusty window. The kind of rain that made everything feel slower, heavier. The new tenant, her name was Claire. Like that, she said it made the world quiet, like the city was whispering secrets she hadn't earned yet. Rose Hill Apartments wasn't much to look at. Old bricks, older windows, and a faint smell of damp would soaked into halls. Still, Claire liked the charm. She liked the feeling of history, of stories in the walls. She had no idea how many stories those walls really held. The landlord, Mr. Penrose, thin as a coat rack and with eyes like wet coal, had shown her around with odd urgency, skipping past one door on the third floor without a word. Room 3B. When Claire asked about it, Penrose didn't even look back. "Storage," he said flatly. "No one goes in there." That night, Claire unpacked while the rain continued to fall. She left the window cracked open, letting the cold wind of the city hum and the occasional sound of dripping from hallway. It wasn't until after midnight that she heard it. Something scraping, then dragging, then silence. She turned down her music and held her breath. Nothing. She laughed to herself, brushing off the nerves. Old building, old pipes. But then she heard it again, closer this time, like someone dragging something heavy across a wooden floor. She stepped into the hallway. The lights buzzed overhead, faint and flickering. Everything was still, empty, except for the door at the far end. Room 3B. There was a wet streak across the floor. Something dark, like a smear. Claire didn't know why she walked toward it. Curiosity? Or something else? Something tugging at her? She stood in front of the door. It looked the same as the others, but somehow older, like it had aged separately from the rest of the building. She leaned in, pressed her ear to the cold wood. That's when she heard it. Breathing. Soft. Shallow. Like someone barely holding on. And then her name, whispered from the other side. Claire. She stumbled back, heart racing. Who's there? Silence. Then, slowly the knob began to turn. The door creaked open an inch. Darkness waited beyond. No light. No sound. Just a void that seemed to lean forward. Hungry. Claire backed away and ran to her apartment, slamming the door shut behind her. She locked it, deadbolted it, pushed the chair beneath the knob, and then she waited. Minutes passed, then hours. Nothing. The next morning, room 3B was sealed again, as if it had never opened. She tried to forget, but the apartment didn't let her. Her lights began to flicker every night at the same time, 3:17 a.m. Her mirror fogged up even when she hadn't used a shower. And sometimes she'd wake up with her hands covered in dirt, standing at the edge of the hallway, staring at 3B, not remembering how she got there. She started dreaming. Dark rooms, shattered glass, a chair in the center of an empty apartment, blood seeping from the walls, and a man, young, pale, eyes like hers, always sitting in the chair, always whispering something she couldn't understand, until one night, she did. Let me remember. Claire started digging. She needed answers. In the local archives, she found the article, Tenant Found Dead in Rosehill Apartment. Ethan James Parker, age 26, room 3B. Photos matched the dreams, and the death was never solved. As she stared at Ethan's face in the newspaper photo, something inside her twisted. Like grief, like guilt, but she didn't know him. She was sure of that. Wasn't she? She kept digging. Found an old therapist letter addressed to a woman named Emily Parker, Ethan's sister. Claire froze. Her last name was Parker. She'd never thought much about it. It was common, unremarkable, but when she asked her mother, the woman went pale. I didn't want to tell you, her mother said over the phone. Ethan was my brother. He died before you were born. I never wanted you to know. I thought it was best. Claire's chest tightened. Family. Blood. That's why the apartment called to her. That's why she could hear him. That night, she returned to the hallway. 3:17 a.m. The door was open. She stepped inside room 3B. No mirrors this time. Just dust, silence, and a single chair in the middle of the room. Facing the window, she stepped closer. Her breath fogged in the air. Her skin crawled. There was someone in the chair. Ethan. He turned slowly. His eyes met hers, and for the first time he looked at peace. Claire, he whispered. You came back. She wanted to cry. I didn't know. I didn't know who you were. You remembered. I didn't even know I forgot. He stood. His form flickered like static, but his smile held. You're the only one who can end this. And what? The loop, the silence, the forgetting. I died here, but my soul got lost, trapped in the in-between. This room became my prison, a place between memory and truth. Everyone who entered either forgot or disappeared. Claire's voice shook. Why me? Because you remembered me, he said, reaching out to her. She hesitated, but then took his hand. Cold, but real. I can bring you back, she whispered. No, he said. You can let me go. The room began to fade. Walls cracking, floor splitting, light pouring in from the cracks in the walls. Laughter echoed, screams, whispers, faces flickered past them, ghosts of other tenants, the ones who never left. Ethan looked around and smiled. "I see the sky again," he whispered. Then he let go and vanished. The room collapsed into light. Claire woke up on her bed, the morning sun pouring in. The hallway was quiet, and room 3B bricked over. Gone. Claire moved out 2 weeks later. Never looked back, but sometimes in other places she hears that voice again. In mirrors, in static, in dreams, a whisper, "Thank you." And somewhere in the folds of time, in the spaces between memory and silence, Ethan Parker finally rests, and the door to room 3B will never open again. Story 2, The Photographer's Last Shoot. It was always the eyes that caught his attention. Raw, unfiltered, unprepared expressions frozen in time. That's what Camel lived for. He wasn't famous, but in the alleys of Karachi's Sadar town, everyone knew the guy with the camera. Black DSLR slung around his neck, like a pendant of power, snapping portraits of strangers, chasing light through broken windows and dusty sunbeams. He had one rule: never ask permission. Spontaneity was truth, and truth made art. But lately, his art was killing people. Camel noticed it first with the old fruit seller near the mosque. He'd captured the man mid-laughter, the sunlight painting his wrinkles gold. A week later, the man was found dead in his stall. Heart failure, they said. Then came the chaiwala, then the girl with the red backpack, and then the young man feeding birds near Frere Hall. All gone, and in every photo, Camel saw the same thing. A shadow, not cast by a tree or a person. It was something else, vague, like a silhouette shaped like a man, but with no features, no edges, like a hole punched into the world. It stood behind the subject in every shot, watching, closer in each one. At first, Camel thought it was a camera glitch, so he cleaned the lens, switched memory cards, used a different lens, but the shadow was always there, only visible after he took the photo, never in real life, only in the frame, and the people in the photos always died, not instantly, but always soon after. Accidents, illness, disappearances, and no one believed him until the police showed up. It was 2 a.m. when they knocked. Plain clothes, flashlights, serious faces. They didn't charge him. Not yet, but they asked questions, showed photos, his photos, all marked with dates and red ink. Coincidence, one of them said. Camel just shook his head. He didn't sleep that night. Instead, he opened his laptop, scrolled through every portrait he'd taken in the last year. There were dozens, all victims, all staring unknowingly into the camera, smiling, blinking, walking, and always the shadow, sometimes standing, sometimes crouching, sometimes crawling along the wall like something alive but wrong. He zoomed in and swore its head tilted toward him, as if it knew. He shut the laptop, tried to breathe, and then he heard the click, not from the laptop, from the camera. It was on. He hadn't touched it, still on the table, but the shutter had clicked. Once, twice, 3 times. Camel slowly turned toward it. The screen showed the last photo of him, sitting in the dark, and behind him, clearer than ever, the shadow, standing inches away, its head touching the ceiling, long arms curled inward, like a spider winged to strike. He turned around, nothing there, just the empty room, but his skin felt cold, like something had just left or just arrived. That night, Camel did something he swore he never would. He He deleted the photo, dragged it to the trash, emptied it, then smashed the memory card with a hammer. But when he woke up the next morning, the photo was back, printed, on his wall, framed, the shadow sharper than ever, and under it, written in handwriting he didn't recognize. Next, Camel didn't leave his apartment for 3 days. The photo remained on his wall no matter how many times he tore it down. It reappeared again and again, always pristine, always framed, his own terrified face staring back at him with a shadow lurking just inches behind. His food spoiled. His phone died. He stopped responding to knocks from friends, from police, from the landlord. He sat with the curtains drawn, lights off, listening to the tick of the wall clock. Sometimes he'd hear the camera click on its own. Sometimes he'd hear his name in the static of a radio. But on the 4th day, he forced himself up. He needed answers. He took the camera, wrapped in a black cloth, and headed to the one place he thought might help, an old camera repair shop tucked away near Burns Road. The owner, Barbara Raymond, was nearly blind but had been working with cameras longer than Camel had been alive. He didn't greet Camel when he walked in, just turned slowly in his stool and pointed at the wrapped bundle in his hand. "You brought it." Camel blinked. "What?" "The curse lens," Baba muttered. I wondered who would end up with it next. A chill swept through Camel. "You know about this?" Baba gestured for him to sit. His hands trembled as he unwrapped the cloth, exposing the camera. He didn't touch it, just stared. "This camera belonged to my son once," he said. "Same lens, same shutter. He was a wedding photographer. Took beautiful portraits, until one day, one of the brides died the next morning. Then another. Then the best man at the 3rd wedding. All died, suddenly, unexpectedly." Camel's mouth felt dry. "Did he see the shadow too?" "He did," Baba said, "but he thought it was a camera defect, until he took a photo of himself." Camel already knew what came next. He died 2 days later, burned alive in his apartment. The fire was blamed on faulty wiring, but I saw the last picture he took. He mailed it to me the night before. Baba's voice trembled now. He was smiling, and behind him was a figure. Black, no eyes, just presence. Camel leaned in. "What is it?" "A ghost." "Worse," Baba said. "It's an echo, a cursed entity that attaches itself to memories, to the moment a soul is captured. When you take a photo, you trap a piece of time. This thing uses that moment to latch on, and then it devours the rest." Camel sat back, stunned. "How do I stop it?" "You can't," Baba said. "You can only pass it on, or destroy the camera. But even then it might come back." Camel left without the camera. He left it there. He walked for hours through the city. The streets that once inspired him now seemed foreign, cold. He passed the places where he'd taken the photos. The chai stand, the mosque steps, the crumbling library wall. They were quieter now, emptier. Then he saw her, a little girl sitting alone on the sidewalk, drawing in a notebook. Her hair was tied in messy braids, her shirt stained with paint. She looked up and smiled. "Cameraman," she said, "you took my picture last week." Camel froze. He remembered now. She'd run up to him, all energy and giggles, begging him to take her photo with her cat. He hadn't hesitated. It was a beautiful shot, pure joy. "Where's your cat?" he asked carefully. The smile faded from her face. "She died yesterday. Got hit by a car." He felt his stomach drop. "Can I see the picture?" she asked. He shook his head. "I deleted it." The girl nodded, as if she understood something he didn't. "Okay," she said, "but I think the man in the picture didn't like me smiling." Camel felt ice crawl down his spine. "What man?" "The tall one. Behind me, the one with the no face." She returned to her drawing like nothing was wrong. Camel walked away, barely breathing. That night, Baba Raymond's shop burned down. No survivors. The news called a gas leak, but Camel knew better. The camera had been inside, and it didn't want to die. 2 days later, Camel received a courier package. No return address. Inside was a black box, and inside that, the camera, pristine, untouched by fire. and on top of it, the new photo. Not taken by him, not of him, but of a woman he'd never met, standing on a balcony, smiling at the sky, and behind her, the shadow, closer than ever. Camel dropped the photo, heart thudding. The curse was spreading. It didn't need him anymore. It could take photos on its own now. The next day, the news reported that woman's death. A freak accident. She'd fallen from her balcony. Her neck snapped instantly. Camel knew what he had to do. He couldn't destroy it. He'd tried, but maybe he could contain it. He drove out of the city, deep into the desert near Thada, where ruins from centuries past still stood like bones of forgotten civilizations. He brought the camera in a lead box, buried it under 30 feet of sand and stone, said a prayer over it, and walked away. He returned to the city, burned all his photos, sold his laptop, and swore never to touch a camera again. But the next morning, there was a package at his door. Inside, a photo of him, sleeping. The shadow crouched at the foot of his bed. This time, its hand was reaching for him. The photo was chilling. Camel couldn't tear his eyes away from it, the edges of the frame trembling in his hands. He recognized his own bedroom. His sheets, his old armchair, the dim lamp flickering on the side table. But the most terrifying thing about it wasn't that he was there, asleep in his bed. It was the shadow. It was taller now, almost human. Its hand was stretched out, fingertips brushing his leg, as though it were waiting for something or someone. The chilling realization hit Camel, like a punch to the stomach. It was no longer just following people. It was hunting him. For the first time, he felt truly afraid. There had been moments before, unease, confusion, disbelief. But now, with this photo, with the growing proximity of the shadow, he knew it was getting closer. Every time Camel tried to destroy the camera, to bury it, to burn it, it came back. It was relentless. The entity that had attached itself to his lens was far older and more malevolent than he had ever understood. And it wanted him. Camel stood in his living room, trembling, holding the photo like it might bite him. For the first time, he thought of the people he had captured. The strangers on the streets, the old fruit seller, the girl with the red backpack, the chaiwala, the cursed ones. Had they all suffered the same fate? Had they been stalked by the shadow? Had the entity used their photos, like it was using his now? Camel couldn't bear the thought. He couldn't face it. And yet, as the seconds ticked by, he knew one thing was certain. He had to stop it. No more running. He grabbed the camera, slung it over his shoulder, and left the apartment. The streets felt different now. The shadows seemed longer, darker. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, that at any moment, the thing that had been haunting him would materialize behind him, reaching out to drag him into the dark. But Camel didn't stop. He kept walking, heading for the one place where he might finally get answers. Baba Raymond's shop had burned down, but Camel knew the old man had mentioned another place, a woman who might know how to destroy the curse. As Camel walked, the fear didn't subside. It only grew. Every step felt like the shadow was getting closer. The city seemed to warp around him, dark alleyways stretching into deeper shadows. He turned a corner, and there in front of him was a figure, a woman. She was standing in the doorway of an old, abandoned building just across from a crumbling mosque. Her long, black hair cascaded around her shoulders, and she was staring at him. Her eyes were hollow, lifeless, but she spoke. "The shadow, it's looking for you," she said, her voice low, raspy. "And you're running out of time." Camel stopped dead in his tracks. "How do you know about it?" he whispered. She stepped forward, as though she could see right through him. It's been following you ever since you first clicked the shutter. Camel's heart raced. Who are you? The curse's keeper, she replied. The one who survived. Camel stared at her in disbelief. What do you mean, survived? She turned and gestured for him to follow. He hesitated, but something about her presence calmed the nerves rattling his chest. He stepped forward, and they walked into the old building, which smelled of damp stone and age. Her footsteps were light, as though she weren't fully touching the ground. You were foolish to think you could destroy it, she said as they climbed a narrow staircase. This thing isn't just an entity. It's a parasite, a manifestation of grief, of trapped souls, of forgotten memories. It feeds on time, and once it attaches itself to you, there's no escaping. Camel stopped. So what? It's never going to stop? The woman turned to him, her face now inches from his own. No, it won't, but you have a choice. She handed him a small, ancient-looking vial filled with dark liquid. This, she said, is a binding spell, a way to trap the shadow inside the camera for good. But she paused, as if weighing the cost. The moment you use this, it will take you, the entity will become part of you, and it will consume you from the inside out. Camel's throat went dry. You will be nothing but a vessel for its hunger, she continued. But in doing so, you will stop it from ever taking another life. Camel's heart pounded in his chest. I can't. You can, she said, but the price is your soul. Her words hung heavy in the air. A price, his life, his soul, all of it. But he knew what had to be done. He took the vial. The liquid inside shimmered in the dim light, dark as the night itself. He stepped outside, camera in hand, the shadow's presence heavier than ever. The woman's warning echoed in his mind, but Camel couldn't turn back now. He couldn't let more people suffer because of him. He lifted the camera to his face, the lens focusing, and there, in the viewfinder, the shadow appeared, darker, taller, more menacing than before. Camel felt it press against his chest, like the weight of 1,000 souls. It was suffocating, but he knew what he had to do. With trembling hands, he uncorked the vial. The liquid poured into the lens. A terrible, deafening silence followed, and then the world went black. Camel woke up to an eerie silence. His eyes fluttered open, but everything was blurry. His body felt heavy, like he was submerged in water. He tried to move his fingers, but couldn't. They felt stiff, almost like they didn't belong to him. As he lay there, his senses slowly returned. He wasn't sure where he was, but he knew he was no longer in the alley where he had stood moments before. He tried to sit up, but it was as though something was holding him down, a weight pressing against his chest. He looked around. The walls of the room were unfamiliar, dark and cracked. The air smelled like damp earth, and there was an oppressive cold in the atmosphere. It was as though the space itself was alive, suffocating. He blinked a few times, trying to clear the fog in his head. The camera, the vial, the shadow, the curse. Suddenly, a sharp gasp escaped his lips, and he shot upright, his heart racing. His reflection stared back at him from a cracked mirror hanging crooked on the wall. His face was pale, gaunt, hollowed out. His eyes were sunken deep into his skull. But it wasn't just his reflection. There, standing behind him in the mirror, was the shadow. It stood tall, silent, just as it had always appeared in the photos, but this time it was more distinct. It had shape, texture, like it had a life of its own. It loomed over him, its figure almost human. Almost. A shiver ran down Camel's spine as the figure reached out with a clawed hand, its fingers stretching toward him. He tried to turn around, but there was no one behind him. The room remained empty. The shadow was trapped inside the mirror. But that wasn't all. Camel glanced down at his hands, only to find that the camera was still in his grip. The same camera that had caused all of this, that had captured the cursed images, that had bound him to the entity. The curse had never left him. It had fused with him. He raised the camera to his eye, hoping that maybe, just maybe, the shadow would reveal itself in the viewfinder once again. And it did. Through the lens, he saw the shadow now crawling out of the mirror. It moved unnatural and slithering, its form distorting, shifting like a liquid. Its dark shape stretched out, filling the entire room. The camera's flash went off without warning, and Camel's heart sank as he saw the creature, still hauntingly familiar. But now, it was more than just an apparition. It was becoming part of him. Camel tried to drop the camera, to rid himself of it, but it was as though his fingers were glued to it. His vision blurred again as he felt a deep, gnawing hunger in his chest. The shadow was not just in the room anymore, was in him. It had won. He could feel it, the cold, the void, the darkness gnawing at his very soul. The shadow had claimed him. But then, as his body began to tremble uncontrollably, he saw a flicker in the corner of his vision, an image in the camera's viewfinder, faint at first, but growing clearer by the second. A flash of light, a silhouette in the distance. It was a person, a woman. Camel's pulse raced as he squinted through the lens. She was standing at the edge of the room, bathed in a pale light, her long hair flowing as though caught in an invisible breeze. Her face was shadowed, but her eyes locked with his. In an instant, the room seemed to darken. The shadows in the corners began to shift, and Camel felt a tug, a pull toward that light. The woman's figure moved closer, her footsteps silent, but each one echoing in his mind like a drumbeat. She was standing right in front of him now, just inches from his face, her hand reaching out. "Leave it," she whispered. The camera, "Leave it and you'll be free." Camel's breath caught in his throat. Her voice was soft, but her words sliced through the heavy air like a blade. The shadow, now growing in size, shrieked behind him, its dark presence threatening to overtake him completely. But Camel couldn't move. The camera was too heavy in his hands, its presence too consuming. The woman reached forward, her fingers brushing the camera. A surge of power coursed through Camel's body, and he suddenly felt lighter, like the weight that had been crushing him for days was beginning to lift. She smiled, her eyes softening. "It is not too late. You can break free. You just have to choose." Her words felt like a distant memory, like a part of him that had been buried deep within. Camel could see it now, clearer than ever. He wasn't just battling the shadow. He was battling the curse of his own creation, a monster he had birthed through his obsession, his desire to capture moments, to trap them. For the first time, Camel felt a flicker of hope. He closed his eyes and, with all the strength he had left, forced himself to drop the camera. The moment it hit the ground, the room seemed to lurch, the shadows retreating. The woman's figure began to fade into the light, her voice echoing softly in his ears. "You are free." And then there was nothing. Camel awoke hours later, his body stiff, his mind foggy. The room was gone. He was no longer in the abandoned building. He was back in his apartment, lying on his couch. The camera was nowhere to be seen, but there was something different. The air was lighter. The darkness, the feeling of something watching him, it was gone. Camel sat up, his heart still racing, his breath shallow. He glanced around the room. Everything appeared normal. The photos on the walls, the old books scattered on the coffee table, the window, the view outside. It was as if nothing had ever happened. But then, as he moved toward the window, his eyes fell on a single photo lying on the floor. He bent down to pick it up, his heart sinking. It was one of his portraits, the first one he had ever taken. The old man with the crooked smile. The old man was gone, but behind him, in the shadow, was something else, a figure, tall, dark, stretching toward the light. The shadow was still there, and it was waiting for its next victim. Story 3, The Forgotten Passenger. It was just another night for Jack Mitchell, a late-night cab driver working the grim, quiet streets of Crestwood. The city lights flickered faintly in his rear-view mirror as his old taxi cruised along the deserted roads. The hum of the engine, was the only sound that broke the silence. Most nights, Jack didn't even mind the solitude. In fact, he preferred it that way. No distractions, no noise, just the road and him. But tonight was different. There was something off in the air, something he couldn't put his finger on. Jack had been driving for years, long enough to recognize the regulars, the people who caught the late-night trains and needed rides to their homes far away from the station. Some of them were familiar faces. Others were strangers passing through. But Jack had never given much thought to the passengers. They were just faces in the back seat. Their stories irrelevant to him. As long as they paid and didn't cause trouble, he kept driving. That night, however, was different. At around 2 a.m., as he pulled up to the station for his usual stop, he noticed a figure standing under the dim lights of the platform. A man. He looked tired, wearing a faded jacket, a cap pulled low over his eyes. His posture was hunched, and his hands were shoved deep in his pockets, as though trying to hide from the world. Jack stopped the cab, rolling down his window. The man didn't say anything at first, just looked at the car and then back at Jack, his gaze heavy, like he had been standing there for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. "Take me to Old Pines Road." Old Pines Road. It was an old, forgotten stretch of road that wound its way through the outskirts of Crestwood, leading to an abandoned area near the woods. Jack had driven people out there before, but it was always the same, quiet, isolated, and eerie. Not a place anyone would want to visit, but there were always a few who asked to be dropped off there in the middle of the night. "All right," Jack said, his voice almost too calm. He wasn't in the mood for small talk, especially at this hour. He motioned the man to get in, and the passenger slid into the back seat without another word. The faint scent of stale cigarette smoke lingered as the door clicked shut. Jack started the engine, pulling away from the station and heading toward the dark stretch of Old Pines Road. The streets grew emptier as the city lights faded behind them, and the only sounds now were the soft hum of the engine and the rhythmic swish of the windshield wipers as they cut through the mist that had started to creep in. The man in the back seat remained silent the entire ride, his presence almost ghost-like. Every now and then, Jack would glance in the rear-view mirror, catching a glimpse of the man's reflection. There was something unsettling about him. His eyes were hard to read, and his face seemed drawn as if he hadn't slept in days. It wasn't until they reached the turnoff to Old Pines Road that the man spoke again. "Just keep driving," he said, his voice low but steady. "I'll let you know when to stop." Jack nodded, though he felt a chill creeping up his spine. The road ahead was narrow, winding to the dark forest, and the headlights barely cut through the thick fog that seemed to gather on the ground like a living thing. The silence between them was oppressive, the kind that makes you feel like you're being watched. But Jack couldn't see anything, not even a hint of movement in the trees. Minutes passed, then 20. Jack's fingers gripped the steering wheel tighter. The only sound in the cab was the soft hum of the tires against the road. Suddenly, without warning, the man spoke again. "You ever wonder about the people you drive around, Jack?" Jack's breath hitched. The man knew his name. He hadn't introduced himself, and Jack didn't remember ever telling him. He glanced into the rearview mirror, but saw nothing but darkness beyond the man's shadowed face. "I don't think about it much," Jack replied, his voice tight, his heart beginning to pound. "I just drive." The man chuckled, a sound that sent a cold shiver down Jack's spine. There was something off about it, like the man was enjoying a secret joke at Jack's expense. "You should," the man said, his tone suddenly sharp. "You should think about it, about what you've done." Jack's stomach twisted. He felt a sudden, inexplicable wave of panic rise in his chest, but he tried to shake it off. The fog outside the window thickened, making it harder to see, and the car seemed to sink into the shadows of the night. Jack tried to ignore the rising unease, focusing instead on the road ahead. And then the man spoke again, his voice a low, eerie whisper that cut through the tension in the cab like a blade. "Do you remember me, Jack?" The question hung in the air, and for a moment Jack couldn't breathe. His grip tightened on the wheel, his knuckles going white. The man's words echoed in his head, setting off a cascade of memories that he had long buried deep inside himself. No, it couldn't be. It was impossible. Jack's thoughts raced as the memories came rushing back. He remembered the night, the rain, the alley, the struggle, the fear, the man, the blood. Jack's pulse quickened, and for the first time in years, his hands trembled on the steering wheel. He had killed someone. 10 years ago. The man in the back seat, the passenger, was the one he had left for dead. Jack's grip tightened on the steering wheel, his fingers slipping slightly as a cold sweat dripped down the back of his neck. His heart was pounding, hammering against his ribs like a drum. He had heard the man's words, "Do you remember me, Jack?" And those words had cracked open the floodgates of a past he thought he had buried forever. The night seemed to stretch endlessly in the fog, the shadows of the trees swaying in the distance like silent witnesses to his sins. Jack fought to steady his breath, trying to ignore the growing sense of dread that was beginning to claw at his insides. But it was no use. The past was closing in on him. The memories that he had tried so hard to forget were surfacing with relentless force, and there was nothing he could do to stop them. He glanced in the rearview mirror again, but the man's face was still hidden in shadow. The figure in the back seat was barely visible, but Jack could sense the heavy presence of his gaze, like the man was watching him, waiting for him to crack. Jack's voice came out strained, a whisper of a man on the edge of his breaking point. "I don't know what you're talking about. I've never seen you before." The man chuckled softly, the sound sending chills down Jack's spine. It wasn't a friendly laugh. It was hollow, like a laugh from the grave. "Oh, Jack," he said, his voice almost sing-song. "You know exactly who I am. You remember that night, don't you?" The words hit Jack like a punch to the gut. His mind flashed back to a night that had been buried in the recesses of his memory, a night he had tried to forget but could never escape. It was 10 years ago, but the details were as vivid as if they had happened yesterday. He had been working a late shift, just like tonight. The rain had been falling in sheets, pouring down in torrents, and the streets had been nearly empty. That was when he picked up a man, a stranger, at the station. The man had been nervous, jittery, but Jack hadn't thought much of it at the time. It was a routine fare, just another ride. But as they drove, something had changed. The man started to get more agitated, asking strange questions, his eyes darting nervously around the cab. It hadn't been long before Jack realized that the man wasn't just some passenger. He was desperate, hiding something. And then the man had pulled a gun on him. The memory hit Jack like a slap to the face. He had been terrified. He remembered the cold steel pressing against his temple, the man's wild eyes, his trembling hands. The gun had gone off, but Jack had acted fast. He'd fought back. The struggle had been messy, chaotic, and in the end, the man had ended up dead. Jack had left from the alley, the blood pooling around his body, and he had driven away, his heart racing, his mind spinning. That night had been the turning point. Jack had tried to bury it. He had never spoken of it, not to anyone. He had told himself that it was self-defense, that it was just an accident. But deep down, he knew the truth. He had killed a man. And now, here was that same man, sitting in his back seat, his presence a dark reminder of the past that Jack had never truly escaped. "You don't recognize me, do you?" The man's voice interrupted his thoughts, breaking the silence like a crack of thunder. "I guess it's no surprise. You left me for dead that night, didn't you, Jack?" Jack's breath caught in his throat. He could feel his pulse racing, his mind spiraling into panic. The man in the back seat wasn't just some random passenger. This was him. The man Jack had killed, the one he had left to die in that alley. But how? How was this possible? Was he hallucinating? Was this some sort of sick joke? You're dead, Jack whispered, barely able to comprehend the words coming out of his mouth. You're supposed to be dead. The man's cold laugh sent a chill through Jack's veins. I was dead, Jack, but you made a mistake that night. You forgot to finish the job. The words hung in the air, and for a moment, everything seemed to stop. Jack's hands trembled on the wheel, his head spinning as the reality of what the man was saying sank in. Jack had thought the man was dead. He had left him there, in that alley, his body cold and lifeless. But now it seemed as if the man had returned from the dead. Jack slammed on the brakes, the cab skidding to a stop on the side of the road. The fog around them seemed to thicken, the world outside the cab growing darker, more suffocating. The streetlights flickered ominously, casting long shadows across the trees. Jack's heart was hammering in his chest, his breath coming in shallow gasps. The man in the back seat didn't move. His face was still hidden in shadow, but Jack could feel his presence, like a weight pressing down on him. I don't understand, Jack gasped, his voice cracking. How are you here? How is this happening? The man's voice was low and cold, the words laced with something sinister. I'm here because of you, Jack. I'm here because you can't escape what you've done. You thought you could forget me. You thought you could outrun your past. But it's always been with you, hasn't it? Jack's breath quickened. The man was right. His past had followed him, haunting him every day, every night. The guilt, the fear, the shame, it had never gone away. And now, it was standing right behind him, reminding him of what he had done. The man's voice grew louder, his tone more mocking. I've been waiting for you, Jack. Waiting for you to remember. Waiting for you to face what you've done. Jack couldn't take it anymore. His hands gripped the wheel so tight his fingers were turning white. He felt like he was suffocating. The air in the cab was thick with tension, and the man's presence was suffocating. The memories flooded back again, the blood, the fear, the desperation. But Jack knew something now. He knew that this wasn't just about guilt. This wasn't just a memory haunting him. The man in the back seat wasn't real. Jack wasn't driving down Old Pines Road anymore. The fog wasn't outside his window. The world around him had faded into background, and there was nothing but the dark, oppressive weight of the man's words. The truth hit him with a sickening finality. Jack had never driven down Old Pines Road. He hadn't picked up any passenger. He was still in the alley, and the man hadn't been dead. Jack had never escaped. He was reliving his crime. And now, the nightmare would never end. The world around Jack seemed to fade into a blur, the edges of reality bending and distorting like a mirage. He had always thought he was free. He had always believed that the past was something that could be buried, that time would erase the mistakes and the guilt. But now, it felt as if the past was reaching out from the shadows, pulling him back into a nightmare that he could never escape. The car was no longer moving. The engine hummed softly, but was almost drowned out by the ringing silence in Jack's ears. He wasn't in Old Pines Road anymore. He wasn't even in the cab. The streetlights, the fog, the distant hum of city life, they were all gone. All that remained was the alley, the cold concrete beneath his feet, and the figure of the man standing in front of him. Jack's breath was shallow, his chest tight with panic. He tried to move, but his feet felt like they were glued to the ground. The man, the same man he had left for dead all those years ago, was standing in front of him, his eyes dark and cold, as if he had been waiting for Jack all this time. You can't escape, Jack, the man said, his voice low and filled with malice. You never could. You never will. Jack tried to speak, but his throat felt dry, as if the very words had been ripped from his mouth. The man took a step closer, his shadow swallowing Jack whole. The air around them was thick with the scent of decay, like the smell of death itself. Jack wanted to run, to scream, to do anything to break free from this nightmare. But there was no escape. I don't understand, Jack finally croaked, his voice barely above a whisper. I thought you were dead. I thought I had killed you. The man's lips curled into a twisted smile, a smile that sent a chill down Jack's spine. You did, Jack. You left me to die in that alley. But you didn't finish it. You didn't do what you should have. You thought you could walk away. Forget, but you never really left. Jack's mind raced. The memories, the blood, the gunshot, the struggle, they all came crashing back, clearer now than ever before. He had killed the man. He had left him to die, and he had convinced himself that it was over, that the nightmare was finished. But this was the truth. He had never escaped it. He had never left that night behind. It had followed him, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to resurface. The man took another step forward, his shadow stretching across Jack like a cloak of darkness. Jack's pulse quickened, and he could feel his breath coming faster, his heart pounding in his chest. His hands shook as he tried to steady himself, but there was no controlling the fear that had taken hold of him. "You didn't think I would come back, did you?" the man said, his voice a low growl. "You thought you could just forget. But I'm here now, Jack, and you're going to remember everything." Jack staggered backward, his back slamming into the cold brick wall of the alley. The man was right. He had tried to forget, to bury the past, but it had all been a lie. He had never left that night. He had never escaped the death he had caused. "You can't undo what's been done," the man said, his tone almost pitying. "But you can face it. You can remember." The world seemed to spin around Jack, and he closed his eyes, trying to block out the overwhelming rush of memories. But no matter how hard he tried, the truth kept coming back. The man's words were like daggers in his mind, cutting to the layers of denial he had built over the years. "I'm sorry," Jack whispered, his voice barely audible. "I didn't mean to." "You didn't mean to," the man interrupted, his voice sharp. "You killed me, Jack, and now you're going to live with it. You're going to live with the truth." The air around them seemed to grow colder, the shadows pressing in tighter. Jack could feel the weight of the man's presence, like a physical force that was suffocating him. The alley, the darkness, the cold. It all felt like a trap, a prison for which there was no escape. Suddenly, there was a sound, a soft, almost imperceptible sound, like a whisper in the wind. Jack's heart skipped a beat as he looked around, searching for the source of the noise. His eyes darted back to the man, but the figure had disappeared. The alley was empty. The air was still. For a moment, Jack didn't know whether to feel relief or dread. Had he imagined it? Had he just hallucinated everything? Was it all in his mind? But then he heard it again, the whisper. It was closer this time. "You can't run from the truth, Jack." Jack whipped around, his eyes wide with terror. The man was behind him now, standing just inches away, his face inches from Jack's own. The man's eyes were cold, hollow, like two dark pools of emptiness. "I told you," the man whispered, his breath cold against Jack's skin. "You're not getting away. Not this time." Jack stumbled back, his body shaking with fear. His chest was tight, his breathing erratic. He could feel his heart racing as the man's words echoed in his ears. "You have to remember, Jack," the man repeated, his voice growing louder, more insistent. "You have to remember everything you did." Jack's mind spun, the memories crashing into him like a tidal wave. The alley, the blood, the body, the gunshot, the fear, the guilt. It was all there, flooding back with terrifying clarity. And then the truth hit him like a freight train. The man was dead, but Jack had never really left that night behind. He had never escaped it. The past had never let him go, and now it was too late to run. There was no escaping the consequences of his actions. He had killed the man, and now he was paying the price. With a final, gut-wrenching scream, Jack collapsed his knees in the middle of the alley, the weight of his guilt crushing him from all sides. The shadows closed in. The whispers grew louder, and Jack knew in that moment that there was no way out. The past had caught up to him. The silence in the alley was deafening, the kind of silence that presses against your eardrums, suffocating all rational thought. Jack's heartbeat was the only sound he could focus on now, pounding faster, louder with each passing second. He knelt there, his body trembling uncontrollably. Overwhelmed by the crushing weight of his past, his sins, the life he had tried so desperately to forget. It had all come rushing back in a tidal wave, unstoppable, unforgiving. The man, the passenger, stood in front of him, the darkness of his eyes pulling Jack in like a black hole. Jack couldn't look away. Every ounce of his being screamed for him to run, to escape, but his legs refused to obey. He was frozen in place, unable to do anything but confront the truth that had been buried for so long. "You can't outrun this, Jack." The man's voice was soft, almost mournful, as if he too felt the weight of their shared history. "You never could." Jack's throat constricted, and he could feel the tears welling up in his eyes. All these years, he had told himself that he was free. He had left that night behind, convinced that his actions, his crime, had been forgotten by everyone, but not by the universe, not by the passenger, not by the man he had killed. "I didn't mean it," Jack choked out, his voice barely above a whisper, his breath ragged. "I didn't mean to kill you." The figure before him took a step closer, his presence like a physical force pushing down on Jack's chest. "It doesn't matter whether you meant it or not, Jack. The moment you pulled that trigger, your life was already over." Jack's vision blurred as memories from that night flooded his mind once again. The alley, the dark stretch of road, the desperate cries for help, the sickening thud of a body hitting the ground, the sense of finality, of power over another life, the way he had just walked away, convinced that he had done the right thing. But now in the darkness of this alley, everything seemed so wrong. The shadows shifted around him like they had a life of their own, and the whispering wind carried with it the remnants of guilt that would never fade. Jack had never left that alley. He had never left the night he killed the man, and the consequences of that act were now all too real. The man's face was inches from Jack's now, his hollow eyes boring into him, seeing straight through him. "You thought you could bury it, Jack, but the past never stays buried. It always finds its way back." Jack recoiled, his head spinning, unable to escape the suffocating atmosphere of the alley. His legs buckled beneath him, and he collapsed to the ground, his hands pressed against his face in an attempt to block out the vision of the man before him. "Please," Jack whispered, his voice barely audible, his words caught in a swell of emotion. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me." But the man said nothing. He simply stood there, unmoving, his presence looming like a dark cloud over Jack's broken soul. The wind picked up again, swirling around them, carrying with the scent of decay of death. It wasn't just a man in front of Jack. It wasn't just his past coming back to haunt him. No, it was something deeper, something that Jack had never fully understood. He had thought the passenger had died, that he had left him behind. But the truth was that Jack himself had never left that night. It was a part of him, embedded in his every step, in every breath he took. He had carried the weight of his crime with him all these years, pretending it was gone. But it was always there, festering beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to rise. "Jack," the man said again, his voice filled with sadness that sent a shiver down Jack's spine. "You can't undo it. You can't take it back. You can only face it now." Jack shook his head, tears streaming down his face. "I didn't mean to do it. I swear, it was a mistake, a horrible mistake." The man looked down at him, his eyes softening for just a moment. "You can't take back a life, Jack, not even with the greatest of regrets. But you can make a choice now. You can either continue running or you can face the truth." For the first time since the nightmare had begun, Jack felt something deep within him stir. A flicker of clarity in the midst of the fog that had clouded his mind for so long. The man had spoken the truth. He could run. He could try to forget again, or he could finally confront his crime, his responsibility. Jack swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He had spent so many years running, pretending that what he had done didn't matter. But it did, and no matter how hard he tried, the past would never stop chasing him. "I'm sorry," Jack whispered again, his voice broken. "I'm sorry. I'll never forget what I did. I can't undo it, but I'll face it now. I'll face what I've done." For a moment, there was silence. The man's shadow loomed over Jack, and Jack could feel the tension in the air, as if something was about to happen, something beyond his control. And then the man spoke one final time. "Goodbye, Jack," he said, his voice soft, almost peaceful. "You've made your choice." With that, the figure stepped back, fading into the darkness of the alley. Jack felt his breath catch in his throat, and for a moment, he wasn't sure the man had truly gone, or if he was simply a figment of his own tortured mind. But as Jack stood there, his body trembling, his heart heavy with guilt and sorrow, he realized that it didn't matter. The man, the passenger, had given him a chance, one last chance, to face the truth, and that was all Jack could do now. He couldn't undo what happened, but he could make sure it never happened again. The night air felt colder now, the silence even heavier, but Jack didn't move. He remained still, staring at the empty space where the man had once stood, knowing that he would carry the weight of his actions for the rest of his life. And as the world around him faded back into reality, Jack knew one thing for certain. The past would never let him go. But at least now, he was finally facing it. Story 4, Room 103, Do Not Clean. They told Eli Carter one thing during his hotel orientation. Never open Room 103. Not don't disturb. Not guests only. Just don't go in. Ever. It was a strange rule for a rundown, third-rate motel on the outskirts of town, especially one desperate enough to hire someone like Eli, a drifter with no references, and a habit of talking to himself when he got nervous. But he needed the money. And when the manager, a stiff old man named Reggie, handed him the faded housekeeping uniform, Eli didn't ask questions at first, but something about that door, it was always shut, always silent, always cold. The brass numbers were a little tarnished, but clear, 103. "Don't clean that room," Reggie had said with gravelly edge in his voice. "You'll see it on the board, but ignore it. It's marked for liability purposes only." "But it's on the cleaning rotation?" Eli had asked, confused. Reggie leaned in close, his eyes dead serious. "That room stays locked. If someone tells you, open it. Anyone. I don't care if it's me, you don't. Understood?" Eli nodded, not because he understood, but because something in Reggie's voice had frozen the blood in his veins. For the first 2 weeks, Eli kept his head down. He vacuumed faded carpets, scrubbed bathtubs that hadn't seen bleach in months, and smiled politely at guests who never tipped. But that room, he passed by it every shift, and it always felt colder than the others. Even stranger, Eli noticed something about the other staff. Whenever they got close to room 103, their behavior shifted. Carla, the senior maid, mumbled to herself and gripped her cart so hard her knuckles turned white. Marco, the night janitor, once walked past it and whispered, "Sorry, not again," before rushing away. The most chilling moment came on a Thursday evening, when Eli returned to break room and found Carla shaking. "Carla, you okay?" he asked gently. She didn't answer. Her eyes were glued to the wall, like she was looking at something that wasn't there. Then she whispered, "Room 103, it remembers us." Eli tried to ignore it. Tried to keep to himself. Tried not to stare at the brass numbers when he passed them. But the curiosity ate at him. Every shift, he caught himself slowing down near the door. He'd glance over and feel this awful sensation, like something behind it was breathing. One night, Eli couldn't sleep. He was in the motel's staff quarters, lying on his thin mattress, staring at the ceiling. The whispers from Carla, the warning from Reggie, the strange presence, all of it coiled inside his mind like a snake tightening its grip. And then he made the mistake. He opened the staff cleaning schedule. Room 103 was listed for deep clean tomorrow. No one else was on shift. It would be just Eli. Morning came. Gray light filtered through the stained windows. Eli stood at the edge of the hallway, alone. His cart waited beside him. The air was heavy and silence clung to the walls. He gripped the doorknob. Cold, like ice. He turned it slowly. It wasn't locked. The door creaked open. The scent hit him first. Old copper. Dust. Something rotting beneath the carpet. The room looked ordinary at first glance. A queen-size bed. A desk. A single dusty window that faced a brick wall. But the longer Eli stood there, the more off it felt. The shadows didn't fall where they should. The mirror on the wall reflected a different version of the room, darker, with a figure standing by the bed. And worst of all, the air was thick with muffled sobbing, like someone crying from far beneath the floor. Eli stepped inside. The door shut behind him with a quiet thud. He turned fast. There was no wind, no draft, no explanation. But he was now inside. Alone, he raised his cleaning cloth, trying to distract himself with work. He began wiping the desk, but his hand froze. There were scratches in the wood, like someone had carved something with a fingernail. He leaned closer. Don't leave me here. Suddenly, the sobbing got louder, closer, and then his reflection in the mirror smiled back at him. But Eli wasn't smiling. Eli stumbled back from the mirror, his breath caught in his throat. He hadn't moved, hadn't smiled, but his reflection had. It stood grinning, wide, unnatural, before tilting its head slightly, as if mocking him. Eli blinked. The reflection snapped back to normal. His own face stared back, pale and confused. He spun around, suddenly aware of how quiet the room had become. The crying was gone. Now there was only silence, and something worse, a feeling like he was being watched. Eli tried the door handle. Locked. No key. It had shut behind him, but now it wouldn't open. Panic flared in his chest. Okay, relax, he muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. It's just a broken lock. I'll get out soon. He turned back to the room. It looked smaller than before. The walls felt closer. He forced himself to keep moving. He stepped toward the closet, the only part of the room he hadn't inspected. He hesitated, hand hovering above the knob. The crying was gone, but he could still hear something, a whisper, so soft, it was like air brushing past his ear. Clean me? He opened the closet. It was empty, but scratched into the back wall, deep and furious, were dozens of tally marks, and names, dozens of names. Some were faded, some were fresh, some still bled. One name stood out, carved in jagged, terrified strokes. Carla. He backed away, heart racing. Carla had said the room remembers. Had she been inside it before? Had it tried to keep her? He turned back toward the bed, and the bed sheets were pulled down. They'd been tucked in seconds ago. Now, they hung over the edge, dragging along the floor. He didn't hear anyone move, but someone or something had changed them. He stepped closer. Under the bed, darkness, not just shadow, a black void, and from it came a noise, not a whisper, not crying, a growl, like something ancient, something angry, something starving. He took a step back, and the mirror shattered. Eli screamed and turned, arms up, heart hammering. Shards rained across the floor, and behind where the glass had been, there was now a passageway. Rough bricks, a tunnel, leading somewhere. He stared in disbelief. That wasn't supposed to be there. This was a normal motel room, right? He inched closer. The air from the tunnel was freezing. It carried a foul smell, rot, old mold, and something else coppery, blood. Still, something pulled him in. A voice, a feeling, or maybe a memory. He ducked and stepped through. The tunnel was narrow, cramped. It forced him to crawl on hands and knees, his breath fogging in the icy air. As he moved deeper, the whispers returned. But they weren't just voices, they were names. Eli, Carla, Reggie, Marco, all the staff. And then, Eli, Carter murderer. He froze. What? No, that couldn't be right. He wasn't a murderer. Was he? The tunnel opened into a small room. It was brick-walled, lit by a single flickering bulb that swung from the ceiling. At the center was a chair, wooden, bolted to the ground, stained dark red. A camera sat on a tripod, old, dusty, pointed at the chair, and behind it, photos. Eli stepped closer, his hands shaking. He looked at the photos, dozens of people, all staff, some smiling, some terrified, all sitting in the same chair. And in every photo, room 103. Suddenly, he saw one more photo, different, older. It was of him, Eli, in the chair, but the date on the back was 2 years ago. Eli stumbled back. What the hell was this? He'd never been here before. He'd never. But then came the flood of memories, like a dam breaking inside his mind. 2 years ago, he'd stayed at this motel. He was drunk, broke, angry, got in a fight with the cleaner. He didn't mean to push her that hard. Didn't know she'd hit her head. Didn't know she'd die. Carla, he'd cleaned up, hid the body in room 103. The staff didn't call the cops. Reggie covered it up to avoid bad press. Said they'd deal with it internally. They sealed the room. Told no one. Eli left. Forgot. Or tried to. But the room never forgot. It had been waiting. For him. Suddenly, the bulb above him shattered. The room plunged into darkness. Then, from the black, a scream, not human, wailing, ripping through his skull. He turned and ran back into the tunnel, crawling, scrambling. Behind him, something followed. Hands grabbing at his ankles, voices crying out, "Stay, clean me, be me." He burst through the tunnel and back into room 103. But the room had changed. Now it looked like a murder scene. Blood soaked the walls. The bed was broken, and in the corner, her, Carla, not alive, not dead, trapped, her eyes locked onto his. "You did this to me," Eli screamed. He backed into the door. It wouldn't open. "Let me out." The ghost raised a hand, and the room screamed with her. Everything vibrated. The walls cracked, and then Reggie's voice, outside the door. "Eli, you in there?" Eli shouted. "Yes, help me. Unlock it." "No can do." Reggie's voice trembled. "You're in now, just like the others." Click. Footsteps walked away. Eli turned back toward the ghost. The room pulsed. The mirror began to reform. And in it, Eli saw not himself, but Carla, smiling, wearing his uniform. Eli stumbled backward, his knees hitting the nightstand as he stared at the mirror. His own face was gone, replaced by Carla's. Her eyes gleamed with something not entirely human, and her smile was not hers anymore. It was his, twisted, mocking, possessed. "No!" he whispered, breath catching in his throat. "This isn't real." But the room whispered back, dozens of voices overlapping like broken records, crackling with static. "This is your doing. You brought this upon yourself. Now you clean it up." Eli clutched his head, shaking it violently. "I didn't mean to kill her," he shouted. "It was an accident." The lights flickered and buzzed above him, casting the room into alternating moments of blinding brightness and choking darkness. The furniture began to vibrate. The air thickened. The wallpaper bubbled like skin blistering in heat. And the bed began to breathe. The mattress rose and fell like a chest, exhaling foul, hot air. The sheets slithered as if something was crawling underneath. Eli backed away toward the closet until he heard something behind him. A wet, dragging sound. He turned. The closet door was open again, and from it crawled a figure. Naked, pale, mangled. The first cleaner. The one Carla had whispered about. His face was caving like it had been smashed with a hammer, and he was crawling toward Eli. CC cleaning. It croaked, blood leaking from its nose. Must clean, can't stop. Eli screamed and leapt over the bed, but the mattress rose up, catching him like a wave of flesh. It rolled beneath him, flinging him across the room. He crashed into the desk. The drawer popped open, revealing something wrapped in an old rag. He pulled it out, hand shaking. It was a blood-stained name tag. Carla, housekeeping. He dropped it like it burned him. Behind him, the closet creature moaned louder. And then, the wall across from him split open. Not physically, but like a curtain being pulled away from a stage. And beyond it, another reality. He stepped forward, mesmerized. What he saw was a loop, a ghostly reenactment, projected in the air like old film footage. Carla entered room 103, mop in hand, humming to herself. Eli, his past self, followed, drunk and agitated. They argued. She tried to leave. He shoved her. She hit the dresser corner, cracked her head. Silence, then blood. She twitched once, twice, then stopped. The film flickered. Eli dragged her body, hid her under the bed, washed his hands, stared in the mirror. Left, that was the truth. Undeniable, unchangeable. And the room recorded it. The moment the vision faded, everything in the room went still. For the first time since he'd stepped in, there was silence. Eli dropped to his knees. His eyes were red, his voice hoarse. I'm sorry. He didn't expect forgiveness. But what came next was worse. From beneath the bed, from the walls, from the mirror, they emerged. Every cleaner, every trapped soul, all of them twisted into versions of what they were at death. Some burned, some frozen, one missing its eyes. They circled him. We cleaned your mess. We paid the price. Now it's your turn. Carla stepped forward, but it wasn't her. Not anymore. She was a room now. Room 103 had taken her in, and now it wanted him too. The door behind him creaked open slowly, but it wasn't a hallway on the other side. It was a mirror of room 103, another one, an identical version, and it was empty, waiting. The spirits pointed. In or stay forever in this one. Eli shook his head. I don't understand. What happens if I go in there? Carla's voice answered. You become part of the cycle. One of us, bound to the room, but not erased. Just watching. Watching yourself again and again. Forever. He looked at her. What happens if I stay? You rot, alone, until someone else opens the door. Then maybe, just maybe, you become them. The cleaners began to chant. Clean it, clean it, clean it. The room started shaking again. The air turned black. The walls dripped blood. The floor cracked. Eli had seconds to decide. He took one last look at Carla. Her face softened. Almost human again. He nodded. I'll take the room. He stepped into the duplicate room 103. The door slammed shut behind him. And then everything stopped. The real room 103 went silent. Still, cold. The next morning, Carla, real Carla, alive again, or maybe reborn, stood behind the front desk. She greeted the next guest with a warm smile. Welcome to Midway Inn. Need a room for the night? The guest nodded. Yeah, whatever's quiet. She handed them a key. Not to room 103, but to 102. Because room 103, it was full. For now. Three months passed. Room 103 stayed sealed. No guests, no cleaners, no questions. The hotel staff avoided it like a sickness. Whispers circulated among the night workers, tales of bloodied footsteps, of whispers behind locked doors, of the mirror inside that never reflected correctly. A new manager once tried to open it out of curiosity. The next day, he quit. No explanation. He just left his badge and drove off in the middle of the night, pale and shaking. Carla's picture still hung in the employee hallway. The real Carla, smiling, frozen in time. And yet, every now and then, a cleaner would swear they saw her mop bucket rolling by the front desk after closing hours. One night, a traveler named Michael Graves checked into the hotel. Middle-aged, quiet, tired eyes, said he was a crime writer researching haunted places. Wanted something authentic. Carla, the new receptionist who'd taken over recently, warned him away from 103. "It's under renovation," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. But late that night, after the staff had gone to bed, Michael wandered the halls, notebook in hand, micro-cassette recorder clipped to his collar. Journal entry, 1:13 a.m. He whispered into Mike, "I'm standing outside room 103. The door's cold. Handle feels sticky." He twisted the knob. Unlocked. He stepped inside. The lights buzzed faintly. The room was untouched, pristine and quiet, as if frozen in time. Michael glanced around. Standard queen-size bed. Desk with a Gideon Bible. Closet half open. Mirror above the sink, cracked down the center. Smells like bleach and mold. He flipped through a few pages of his notes. The story goes, a girl named Carla died in this room. A cleaner. Disappeared after her shift. Then others vanished too. Some say the room keeps them. He paused. Looked at the mirror. Saw something move. He turned, nothing. The bed creaked behind him. He snapped his head toward it, but the sheets were undisturbed. Then the whispers began. Faint at first, like wind in the walls. Then louder, voices overlapping. Male, female, childlike. All messes must be cleaned. Blood, stains don't fade. You brought this. Michael backed toward the door. Only it wasn't there anymore. In its place, just wallpaper. Seamless, as if no door had ever existed. His breath caught in his throat. What the hell? He rushed to the mirror. Touched it. It shimmered like water. On the other side was not his reflection. It was another man. Same clothes, same notepad, but different face. Dead eyes, blue lips, blood pouring from ears. And behind that version of him, dozens of others, all holding mops, vacuums, cleaning sprays, all watching. One by one, they started to smile. Michael screamed and swung his notebook at the mirror, shattering it into 1,000 shards. But instead of falling, the glass melted, turned to liquid, and spilled up the wall. From the puddle on the floor, a figure rose. It was Eli, or what was left of him. His face was warped, stretched like old plastic. One eye hung loose. His voice came from his chest, not his mouth. You chose to enter. You read the story. You knew the rules. Michael stuttered. I just came to learn. To write. I didn't believe it. Eli grinned. That's what I said too. The closet door swung open. Inside was a replica of room 103. Empty. Waiting. Eli pointed toward it. Start mopping. Michael screamed again, but the room swallowed it. His voice didn't carry. No one heard. 6 a.m. Front desk. Carla, still there, watched the monitors. She saw room 103's screen flicker once, then show a new face. Michael Graves, trapped behind the glass. Notebook open on the floor beside him, filled with the words. Do not enter. Do not clean. Room 103 is alive. She sipped her coffee. Didn't flinch, because the room always needed one more. It never stayed full for long, and someone always checked in, thinking they would be the one to tell its story. But the truth? The story writes you. Story 5. The tape recorder confession. It started with a sound. A slow, clicking rewind, like an old cassette being brought back to beginning. Detective Ryan Cole paused mid-step outside evidence room, and frowned. The precinct was quiet. Too quiet. The night shift had always been peaceful after 2 a.m. No suspects, no ringing phones, just a buzz of overhead fluorescence and the hum of the vending machine. But now, click, click, play. A voice spilled into the hallway from behind the door. Raspy, unnatural, low. My name doesn't matter. But I remember the first one. The first neck I broke. The way it sounded like dry wood snapping under pressure. Ryan stiffened. He was alone on duty tonight. His boots creaked against the old tiles as he stepped closer to the door. The light inside Evidenceby was off, but something glowed faintly through the crack beneath. An eerie red light, like an old analog power LED. He opened the door slowly. The room was filled with sealed boxes, rusted lockers, and the smell of dust and age. And there, sitting atop an old metal table with peeling paint, was a tape recorder, a reel-to-reel model, definitely not department issued, and it was running. He stepped closer. The voice continued. Number 7 was a teacher. She screamed the whole time, said she had children. I asked her to spell mercy. She failed. Ryan's breath caught in his throat. He hit stop. The machine clunked into silence. There was no tape inside, just empty reels, still turning. He stepped back and glanced around. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe the guys from Homicide were messing with him again. Or maybe someone was playing old audio through a hidden speaker. Still, something about that voice chilled him to the core. He shut the door and locked it, logged it as noise disturbance in the overnight file. But when he got back to his desk, the voice had followed. This time, through the radio. Detective Cole, you ever wonder how it feels to choke the life out of someone? It's personal, intimate, just you and them. No one else, no judgment, just silence. The radio wasn't even tuned to an active channel. He yanked the plug from the wall. The voice kept playing. Ryan stood frozen, sweat sliding down his back despite the cold. And then it stopped, dead silence. He sat in his chair, trembling slightly, unsure whether to call it in or chalk it up to exhaustion. But before he could decide, the precinct lights flickered. One by one, like dominoes, the hallway dimmed. Somewhere in the dark, the tape recorder clicked again. Tomorrow, I'll tell you about number 14. He begged. They always beg. But that's the part one like. Detective Ryan Cole didn't sleep that morning. After logging his shift, he drove home in silence. No music, no podcasts, just his own breathing and the constant replay of that voice in his head. He didn't tell anyone. Who would believe him? But when he returned to the precinct the next night, things had changed. Evidence room was sealed with yellow tape. Do not enter. Under review. Sergeant Max Henley had been found inside, face pale, eyes bloodshot. Not dead, but close. He was muttering to himself, rocking back and forth in the corner beside the tape recorder. He'd scratched something into his arm. Numbers, dates, names, confessions. Ryan saw the ambulance take him away. Later that night, he slipped into the evidence locker again. The recorder was gone, but he could still hear it. Not in the room. In his head. You're curious now, aren't you, Detective Cole? You want to know why they scream, why they beg, why they still come back, even after death. He gritted his teeth and shut his eyes. But it didn't help. The voice was growing stronger. He started researching. Turns out the recorder was logged into evidence back in 1979, connected to a serial killer named James Halberd, a.k.a. the Whisper Butcher. Killed 17 people. Never caught. Confessed in anonymous letters, each one detailing a murder weeks before it happened. But Halberd wasn't supposed to have ever used audio. The case was cold. No recordings ever surfaced. No one mentioned a voice. Until now. Ryan dug deeper. Halberd was presumed dead after a fire in an abandoned house outside town. Body never found. Just charred remains and a melted reel-to-reel recorder at the scene. Same model as the one he saw. Same burned edges. Same clicking playback ticks. At 2:11 a.m., the voice returned. This time, in Ryan's bathroom mirror. He stared into the foggy glass after a cold splash of water, and just before he turned away, he saw his own reflection smile. But he hadn't. The smile belonged to someone else wearing his face, and it whispered, 17 was enough. I need a partner. Someone with rage buried deep down. Someone who understands the beauty of silence. After a scream, Ryan smashed the mirror, but the voice didn't stop. At the station, things got worse. Officers started reporting dreams. Same voice, same tone, confessing things they never told a soul. One officer woke up with blood on her shoes. Another walked straight into traffic on her way to work. They'd all been near the tape, recorded the night it turned on. Then came the tapes. Every morning, a new reel would appear in the break room. No label, no fingerprints, just audio, confessions, murder after murder. Some matching cold cases from decades ago. Others describing crimes that hadn't happened yet. And at the end of each tape, always the same phrase. Detective Cole, time to clean your hands. Join me. Ryan tried burning one of the tapes. It screamed, literally screamed. A voice, female, tortured, broke out from the plastic as it melted. He could still hear it in his head even after it was gone. The precinct decided to shut down the entire East Wing. Room B was bolted shut, but that didn't stop the voice. Ryan started losing time. One night, he woke up in his car, keys in the ignition, hands stained with something brown and flaky. Another time, he found a bloody shirt in his hamper that wasn't his. His neighbors said they'd seen him standing in his driveway at 3 a.m., mumbling to the wind. His phone started playing static voicemails with breathing behind them. And then came the letter. Typed, no return address. Inside, a single sentence. You're next. 17 is never the end. Ryan brought it to Captain Mills. But the captain looked at him with concern. There's no letter here, Cole. He showed him. The envelope was empty. Ryan swore he'd seen it. Touched it, felt the paper. That's when he realized no one else could see what he could. Not anymore. He tried taking leave. Tried therapy, tried priests. Nothing worked. The voice kept coming. Every time he passed a mirror, every time a radio played static, every time he closed his eyes. You want to know what it feels like, don't you? To hold someone's life in your hands, to silence the noise forever. One more, just one more. Ryan stopped going home, started sleeping in his office with the lights on. He was afraid he'd hurt someone if he went outside. But the tapes kept coming. One night, he received one marked. Hashtag 18 Cole. He played it. It's raining. The city's quiet. The knife is cold in my hand. He doesn't see me coming, but I've been watching for days. He drinks at the same bar, walks the same route home. I'm not angry, just empty. That's why it has to happen. That's why I picked Detective Ryan Cole. Number 18. He dropped the recorder and vomited on the floor. The voice was his, word for word. It was his voice describing a murder that hadn't happened yet, but he knew it would. The victim's name? Officer Jerry Brandt, Ryan's friend, his partner. The tape ended with the sound of breathing, and then whispering, and then laughter. Ryan didn't show up for roll call. He sat in his apartment, the blinds drawn, the room dark except for the flicker of an old desk lamp. On the table in front of him lay tape number 18, still spinning inside the old recorder. He hadn't touched it since the night before, hadn't eaten, hadn't slept, but the whisper kept going. He had tried everything, destroying the tape, pulling out the ribbon, even smashing the recorder with a hammer. But every morning it was back, untouched, clean, waiting. The voice returned with it, his own voice, but older, deader. More hollow. You know how it ends, don't you? You've always known. You buried it. But I was watching even then. He opened a file on James Halbert again, the Whisper Butcher. It started to make sense now. Not the murders, but the method. 17 victims, each selected, each predicted, each tape recorded before the act was done. There had to be more to it, something deeper. He returned to the archive room, this time alone. Late night, 3:07 a.m. The security cameras blinked, then went dead. He forced open the back locker. Inside, two boxes marked H1979A and H1979B. More tapes, not just 17. Dozens, each labeled with a name and a date, some dating before the official case even opened. He picked one at random. #04, Thomas Callahan, April 3rd, 1973. He pressed play. It wasn't Halbert's voice. It was a woman. Calm, soft, confessing. He was cruel, not just to me, to everyone. So I waited, watched, followed. The first cut was just curiosity. The second, relief. Ryan stared at the recorder, horror tightening his throat. This wasn't just Halbert's voice. It was everyone. Different people, different confessions, all filtered through the same recorder. And each voice ended the same way. I thought it was just a tape. I didn't know it would remember me. I didn't know it would keep me here. The recorder wasn't just a tool. It was a trap. It held voices, memories, souls. That's why the tape screamed when burned. That's why no one could destroy it. It was feeding on them. Ryan took a deep breath and picked up tape number 18 again. He pressed play, knowing full well what he was about to hear. His own voice, his own descent. I remember the first time I held a knife. Not a cop issue, just a kitchen knife. And I wondered, what would it feel like? Not to kill, just to be the last thing someone saw. That power, that moment, that silence. Ryan yanked the plug out of the wall, but the voice didn't stop. It kept talking, even without power, even without tape. You think it's still the tape, don't you? But it's you. You're the recorder now. Ryan stumbled back, eyes wide. He looked at his hands. They were bloody, faint red stains beneath the fingernails. He hadn't done anything, had he? He rushed to the sink, scrubbing furiously. The water ran red. Behind him, in the mirror, he saw it again. Himself, but different, not a reflection. A copy, smiling. Still, you wanted to forget, but I didn't. I was there the night Halbert burned, and I never left. A memory flashed, brief and sharp. He was a child, maybe 10, standing outside a burning house, screaming, and inside a man, burning, reaching, James Halbert. Ryan's father? No, that couldn't be. Could it? He collapsed to the floor. When he came to, it was nearly dawn. The city outside was waking up. The voices were quieter now, but he knew they'd come back. He drove to Officer Jerry Brandt's apartment. He didn't know what he'd say. He just knew the tape had predicted his partner's death, and he couldn't let that happen. But when he knocked, no answer. The door was unlocked. He pushed it open slowly. The room smelled like copper and dust. The floor was stained dark, and Jerry was gone. A fresh tape sat on the kitchen table. Ryan walked over, shaking, and pressed play. It wasn't his voice. It was Jerry's. I saw him in the hallway again. The man with no eyes. He keeps saying I have to confess. I don't even remember what I did, but he says it doesn't matter. The recorder knows. It always knows. Ryan dropped to his knees. It was too late. He hadn't done it, but the recorder had taken Jerry anyway. Or maybe it used Ryan to do it. He couldn't tell anymore. He stumbled outside. The city was too bright, too loud. He walked without knowing where, the voice echoing his skull like a never-ending loop. You know what has to be done. 17 wasn't the end. But 18? 18 will be beautiful. And you will be free. The rain began before he reached the precinct. Not a storm. Just a steady, cold drizzle that soaked through his shirt and clung to his skin like guilt. The city never slept. But tonight, it seemed to hold its breath. Ryan stood outside the old station. He looked up at the windows of the archive wing. One was cracked open. Faint light bled through. He'd been here every night this week, and yet tonight felt like the last. Something about the silence, the weight in the air. He stepped inside. The hallways greeted him like old scars, familiar and dull, yet aching. He carried nothing with him. No badge, no gun, just the old tape recorder, wrapped in a soaked towel, humming faintly against his palm. It still whispered. His voice, then others, then silence, but always coming back. As he passed the break room, he saw shadows move across the glass. Officers, maybe, or just echoes. He didn't stop to check. The elevator wasn't working. It never worked after 3 a.m., so he took the stairs, each step creaking louder than it should. Or maybe it was the building remembering. The archive sat behind a heavy steel door, always locked. But tonight it stood open. Ryan stepped through and shut it behind him. The room was different now. The fluorescent lights flickered weakly. The tapes were no longer stacked on shelves. They were lined along the walls in neat rows, each one spinning slowly in midair. No wires, no cases, just reels, turning endlessly, whispering to one another in low, bone-dry voices. Ryan swallowed hard and walked to the center of the room. There was a table there now, one he didn't remember. On it, a fresh blank tape. Beside it, a recorder newer than the one he carried. Sleek, black, it looked untouched, as though it had been waiting. He heard the voice again, but this time not from the recorder. It came from the walls, the spinning tapes, the air. You've heard them all, their sins, their last words. Now it's your turn. Ryan sat down at the table. For a long time, he said nothing. He stared at the tape, at his reflection in the silver casing. He thought of Jerry, of the 17 victims, of the woman's voice on tape number 04, of the memory of fire, real or not. He pressed the red button. The tape began to spin, and he spoke. My name is Ryan Hall. I was born in 1988. I became a cop because I wanted to fix something in the world, but I think I was always broken. He exhaled shakily. I don't know if the recorder found me or if I found it, but it knows me better than I do. It remembers things I buried. I remember watching the house burn. I remember a man screaming my name. He paused, eyes welling. They said Halbert was the first, but I think the evil was always in the recorder. I think it just needed a voice. The tape kept spinning. The whispers in the room grew louder, chanting, repeating his name, his sins, in voices not his own. He clenched his jaw. I won't run. I won't pass it on. No more tapes. No more confessions. This ends with me. He stood, walked to the shelf, pulled down the oldest reel, tape number 01, then another and another, until he'd stacked every reel in the center of the room. They didn't resist, but they spun faster, screamed louder. Ryan poured gasoline over the pile. Every drop. He looked one last time at the recorder on the table, and then at his own, still humming, still whispering. He lit the match. The tapes caught instantly. The air filled with screams, not just of pain, but of memory. Each tape shredded itself in agony, the voices burning out into ash. The recorder in his hand shattered. The one on the table melted. The walls pulsed. The building shook. And for a moment, the room went white. Silence. When Ryan woke, he was outside, sitting in the middle of the street, rain pouring down, sirens distant. The precinct behind him was gone. Nothing but rubble and scorched concrete. No fire trucks. No news vans. No people. He stood slowly. No wounds. No blood. He checked his pockets. Empty. No badge. No tape. But in the puddle at his feet, He saw a shape, a tape recorder, untouched, clean, still humming. He stared at it for a long, long time. Then he turned and walked away. If you made it to the end, that means you're part of the Mr. Darsnight's family. Thank you for sticking around. If you enjoyed tonight's story, make sure to hit that like button and share it with others who crave a good scare. Don't forget to subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss out on another chilling tale. Until next time, keep the lights low, stay safe, and always remember, the darkness is closer than you think.